The Raptors should be very concerned as many teams around the NBA are lining up a major move for forward OG Anunoby, and unfortunately for Toronto fans, the situation is a lot worse than you think. Let's get into it. Welcome everybody to Amateur Sports. This is the YouTube channel that is completely dedicated to providing you Toronto Raptors news and coverage in videos just like this, as well as live stream watch-alongs and some added YouTube shorts. If you like what you see from today's video, then make sure you have smashed that like button. Let's try to get this video up to 200 likes today, and also make sure you're subscribed to the channel to keep up to date with all this great content, and you can help me on my road to 16,000 subscribers. The situation in Toronto is turning into a troublesome one with OG Anunoby in regards to his contract and what his future really looks like with the Raptors. OG Anunoby is on an expiring contract at this point. Yes, he has the option to take a $19.9 million player option at the end of the season, but all signs are pointing towards OG getting a massive contract at the end of the year, and there is a distinct possibility that is not going to be with the Raptors. So opportunity knocks potentially for other teams to swoop in and make that signing for OG Anunoby, and the opportunity knocks to potentially make a trade for the players so the Raptors can cash in now and not have a repeat of the situation that transpired with Fred VanVleet, where ultimately the player walks away for nothing. So OG so far this season has looked pretty tremendous all over the floor. Specifically on defense, he has very much looked once again like a defensive player of the year candidate. On the offensive end, he's doing his thing. In fact, maybe doing a little bit more even than we've seen in the past with the way he's shooting the basketball and the way he's been efficient on the inside, much more suiting his game to the modern NBA, where he's getting right to the rim and finishing up strong, using his size, strength, and athleticism to get to his spots. Now, the game against the Boston Celtics was not OG Anunoby's best, but widely recognized around the league as one of the premier 3-and-D plus role players, 3-and-D players, elite role players in the NBA. Many teams picture OG Anunoby as perhaps the final piece of their championship puzzle, and for that reason, there is going to be a lineup of teams at the end of the season looking to get OG's signature. But if OG would want to remain in Toronto, if the Raptors are really pushing to bring the player back, why is it such a problem that OG Anunoby's on an expiring contract? Why can't the Raptors simply just extend him right now and no longer have to worry about the impending free agency, or perhaps having to trade him before the trade deadline because they don't want to risk a player leaving in free agency? Well, this is where the situation becomes extremely complicated for the Raptors. Because OG's contract currently is so team friendly, like it shouldn't be a problem, but it is. OG has developed into such a premier player in the league, and his contract right now is so team-friendly that the max contract extension that the Raptors are able to offer him right now is only 4 years, $117 million, under $30 million per year. They can only go up a certain percentage from the former contract, or the current contract at this point, for that extension. Therefore, that's why they're only allowed to give him that 4-year, $117 million contract. Widely predicted around the league is that OG is going to receive, like, bare minimum $30 million a year in free agency, so it doesn't really make any sense whatsoever for OG to take that current extension. And even if there's a threat of injuries that he wants to mitigate, and at the end of the season, maybe those contracts aren't really available for him anymore, well, he does have the player option where he can fall back on that if he has to. So there's no need for OG to avoid risk and sign the contract right now. He is bound to get a massive payday at the end of the season, whether or not that be from the Raptors. So it becomes a question now. How much is OG Anunoby actually worth? Well, in terms of his actual value for a team in the NBA, how much you would be willing to pay OG Anunoby if you're a Raptors fan looking at just straight up his value, you're probably looking at $32.5 million a year. That would be my best estimate based on what we've seen from the player, based on his age, based on how far he can go in his career. $32.5 million seems fair, but when it comes to a player signing a new contract, as the Raptors rudely learned in the previous offseason, it's not just about what they're worth. It's about what other teams are willing to pay. And one team who might be willing to pay up big time is the Philadelphia 76ers. Yes, they've brought in Nick Nurse. Obviously, maybe there's a bit of ties there between Nick Nurse and OG Anunoby, but the Sixers are in championship mode. They want to put a contender out there, and they possibly see OG as that missing piece that makes them a true contender in the NBA. Because right now it really feels like they're a peg or two behind the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. This is the sort of player in OG that significantly can elevate a team to a new tier in the NBA and vault this Sixers team into championship contention. So along with the 76ers, there's going to be a wide variety of teams who are lining up at the end of the season trying to give OG a contract. So all of a sudden, this becomes a bidding war. We look at the Fred VanVleet situation of the previous offseason. Fred VanVleet is not worth $42 million. No way is, Fred VanVleet's a good player. He's had a good start to the season with the Houston Rockets as well. He is in no way worth $42 million a year, but it doesn't really matter what he's worth. It matters what another team is going to be willing to pay the player. And when it comes to this situation with OG, with perhaps a number of teams trying to make this deal happen, all of a sudden we're looking at 35, maybe even more. The Philadelphia 76ers reportedly would be able to offer OG Anunoby a starting salary of $40 million per year. And the reason they are going to be able to afford that and possibly make that happen is the $40 million Tobias Harris is getting paid comes off the books at the end of the season. They are going to be willing to shell out a big sum of money to try and lure OG to Philadelphia. So for the Raptors, when it comes to OG, the situation that's brewing, how much they're actually going to have to pay him, it becomes scary because teams are going to be willing to give him a big offer, and the Raptors are also having to concern themselves with a Pascal Siakam free agency coming up and a Gary Trent Jr. free agency that is coming up. This makes the situation a problem. Not to mention the fact that Scotty Barnes is also extension eligible at the end of the season, where he's almost certainly going to be getting that rookie max extension. Now, obviously, that's not on the books next season, but it's just another piece of financial payment that the Raptors are going to have to concern themselves with. So with all these things going on, all of these contracts, the worry about a player of OG Anunoby's caliber leaving the team completely for free, maybe a trade comes into question for the Raptors. And for OG, it does make sense that a trade could go down for the player because as much as he's on an expiring contract, yes, teams can wait to the end of the season to sign the player. OG is good enough and fits a specific role well enough that teams will be willing to make that payment in a trade to secure him for the rest of the season. If you feel like that this is a player that really vaults you into a new tier of NBA status as far as the championship contenders are concerned, you would be willing to make that splash at the trade deadline or before to make this deal happen. And one team that could do this as well is, again, the Philadelphia 76ers. They just lost James Harden in that trade, and what they acquired in return, along with a sum of old players on expiring contracts who also add on to the payment they can make OG in the season. Along with getting those players, they added in 2 first-round picks. Those are 2 first-round picks that they're going to be looking to flip, especially after the way they've looked to start the season. The Sixers have been much better than expected. They seem like they're able to maybe even compete with Boston, Milwaukee, but something that really vaults them there again is an OG Anunoby trade. So if they see an opportunity to strike this season, who's to say they wouldn't be willing to offer 3 first-round picks to pry the player away from the Raptors and get him in a Philadelphia 76ers uniform? Give him the possibility of signing an extension in Philadelphia at the end of the season. Re-sign the player at the end of the season. What the Raptors have at the end of the season that other teams don't is the ability to pay him more. If the Raptors want to give OG the max allowable contract, they can give a higher sum of money over the course of 4 years than any other team in the NBA can provide. The Raptors can give OG, let's say, a starting salary of $35 million. They can increase that number by a maximum of 8% per year based on the salary cap elevating, whereas other teams around the NBA are only to increase that sum, increase that 1-year figure by a 5% increment every single year. So the Raptors would be able to pay OG more than any other team, but the problem once again starts to become, perhaps OG wants to go somewhere else, perhaps this, perhaps that. All these ways in which OG can end up in a new uniform and the Raptors would get absolutely nothing in return. So at the end of the season, the situation for the Raptors, there needs to be an assessment right now. How far are you willing to go to pay OG Anunoby? Because if you're Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster and you're looking at it right now and you're not willing to give OG that 35 base plus the 8% increments around $155 to $160 million a year over 4 years, if you're not willing to even consider giving OG that number at the end of the season, and that's a lot for OG, I get it, but if you're not going to give him that, I firmly believe another team might be in the ballpark of being willing to give him the max allowable possible. Max contract players aren't what they used to be. Fred VanVleet just got a max contract. So who's to say a player with the impact of OG Anunoby couldn't get one as well? So a major decision needs to be made by the Raptors because they aren't willing to give him that sum of money. Then it might be worth it to look for a trade right now and cash on the player before he leaves potentially completely for nothing. The Raptors just need to make a decision. If they're willing to pay up, you can keep the player, I think. But if you're not going to be willing to pay up, don't lose a player as good as this for nothing. The organization, the franchise, cannot afford it. What do you guys make of the OG contract situation? Where do you think he's going to go? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments down below. That's all from me today. Drop a like if you enjoyed, smash that like button, and also subscribe for more content just like this.